Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Marketing and Mindset with your host, Matt Miller. And today we're going to be going over one of my favorite all-time books. Have you ever wondered what habits you could implement into your day-to-day activities that will bring out the best of you? Not who you are today, but if you envision the best version of yourself, what are those habits that you'd have to create on a day-to-day basis that would align with that version of yourself? Have you ever wondered what the exact 6 high performance habits are that high performance use on a day-to-day basis? And it's not my opinion, but it's backed by the world's largest high performance study. In Brendon Burchard's book, High Performance Habits, he talks about the 6 high performance habits that high performers use on a day-to-day basis. And like I mentioned, it is backed by research and is backed by science. And the study takes place in 190 countries, 300 interviews with leaders in 11 countries, over 174,000 survey participants, over 2 million online education users, and over 70,000 high performance coaching sessions. Through all of that, the author creates 6 unique high performance habits that are used on a day-to-day basis by the highest performers and highest achievers in the world. In this podcast episode, I'm going to be giving my opinion of the book, and then I'm going to be going over what these exact 6 habits are that high performers utilize. Now that I've described the high-level overview of the podcast episode, the first thing I want to talk about is my opinion of the book. So first of all, I gave this book a 9 out of 10. And anytime that you have an author who also narrates the book on Audible, for example, I always recommend picking up the audio version, and then you compare it with the physical copy of the book if it makes sense for you. However, I listened to this book on the audio version, and with Brendon narrating it, I got a lot of value out of it. So I gave it a 9 out of 10, and the audio book is 10 hours and 36 minutes. And if it's pages, it's probably around 350 pages. And I ended up reading this book in August of 2023. And I've read over 100 books in 100 weeks. I've read a book a week for 2 years now. And this is one of the top 10 books that I've read in that time period. I would actually say is probably one of my favorite, maybe a top 3. So I would definitely recommend going to get a copy of it and understanding these 6 habits that high performers implement in their day-to-day activities. The very first habit that Brendon Burchard talks about is seeking clarity. And this habit revolves around setting intention. So if you think about it, the very first time that you go out to set a goal, the very first thing you need to do is have clarity of where exactly you stand. You need to know where exactly you are before you can envision where you need to go. So if you have clarity and you can set intention to understand where you're at, then it'll give you the best chance to seek that clarity. And one thing that's talked about in the book is Brendon asks the question, what are the feelings that we're after? Not really what we want to achieve, but the feeling that we would get once we achieve that. And if we can follow what our feelings are telling us, then that'll help set us up for success. And one thing that stuck with me when reading this book is that Brendon talks about setting triggers throughout the day. And what I mean by that is every time in your day-to-day activities that you have something happen, you can use that as something to trigger intention. And let's say every day, for example, at 3 o'clock, your alarm goes off and you look at it and it says exercise. So that'll give you that trigger every day at 3 o'clock to get some sort of exercise, whether you're doing your full routine or maybe you're just going to take a walk. But you can do that throughout your day to set that intention. Or maybe you use the example in the book, every time you walk through a door, maybe that door could be a trigger for you to slow down and for you to take a couple deep breaths. That's just one example that he used to set intention on a daily basis. That is the first high performance habit, seeking clarity. Number 2 is generating energy. So sure, we can do the basics on a day-to-day basis by getting enough sleep, eating well, exercising. But what the author does is he does a really good job of explaining beyond the basics of what we could do to increase these habits. One thing that he recommends is priming the emotions that we want to experience before we actually go through that experience, also known as visualizing. A lot of times when we visualize ourselves giving a good presentation at work or getting a good exercise routine in, it'll give us more energy, more momentum, and more motivation to go actually do it. And he uses that example for priming the emotion. Another thing that's mentioned is throughout the day, we have a bunch of different transitions. So if you think about it, right when you wake up, when the time you wake up, maybe there's a transition when you stand up and go brush your teeth. Then there's a transition to go in eating food. Then there's a transition to when you get in your car. And then once you get to work, from getting out of your car and going into work, that's a transition. Or maybe it's from one meeting to the next meeting. And if something bad happens from one transition to the next, a lot of times we carry that negative thought or that negative energy into the next task. He talks about owning the transitions so we don't bring that negative energy in and that we start fresh. And a lot of times this will give us more energy. For example, if we have a bad meeting at work, before going on to the next meeting, take a few minutes and just get it out and take a few deep breaths before going on to the next meeting. And that will hopefully clear up the next meeting and set greater intention and hopefully give you better energy levels. And that is number 2, generating energy. The third high performance habit is raising necessity. I believe that high performers have a lot less of a threshold to take action than ordinary people do. When high performers know that they have to get something done, a lot of times they'll act quicker, even though they don't have all the data, all the statistics, everything that's needed before they go and take action. Maybe they're only 50% confident or 75% confident before taking action, as opposed to another person who might wait a lot longer trying to get closer to 100%. But in the meantime, they waste so much time and procrastinate so much that they don't take action soon enough. But high performers will often pounce on a task and get it done, even if it's not perfect. And also, high performers are also very good at prioritizing tasks that mean the most and getting them done accordingly. And that is the third high performance habit, or raising necessity. And then number 4 is increasing productivity. And Brendon talks about increasing the outputs that matter and also saying no. A lot of times we get caught up in doing the little tasks and saying yes to everything because we think it's going to be a good learning experience. But whenever we say yes to a certain task, we're ultimately saying no to all the other tasks that we could be doing instead. One thing that sets high performers apart is they're willing to say no 99% of the time and only taking on that 1% that will bring them to the next level. Brendon also emphasizes not getting distracted. And he says the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Again, he says the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Making sure that we're not getting distracted and focusing on the most important thing at any given moment. One thing that I've gotten very conscious about is understanding where my time goes on a daily basis. And one thing that I really understood was I was spending about an hour each day making dinners and then cleaning up. And I thought to myself, how could I automate this? How could I create a system to save time throughout the week? What I ended up doing is saying, all right, Sunday, I'm going to spend half a day in meal prep. But what that did for me is it saved an hour each day during the week, even though I had to spend more time on Sunday. And ultimately, this has worked well for me. Another thing that I do is I noticed that a lot of my decision making was delayed or procrastinated because I didn't know what I needed to do next. So every Sunday, I make it a daily practice. I have a planner and I map out what I'm going to do each day of the week. And then that planner tells me what I need to do and what I need to focus on. And it takes time away from me making a decision and me being distracted. And that wraps up the 4th habit of increasing productivity. Now, the 5th habit is developing influence. And Brendon talks about the need to challenge others to grow and also become a good role model. And he describes it as 2 overlapping circles, one circle on the left, one circle on the right. And in the overlapping section is the role model, or developing influence. And it's a combination of 2 things in each of those circles. The first thing is teaching people how to think, And the second thing is challenging people to grow and contribute. So when you can teach people how to think and then also challenge them to grow and contribute, that's where you're going to be a role model, and that's where you're going to generate influence. Because we can only get so far by doing things on our own. Eventually, we'll need to be able to have the power to influence other people to get tasks done for us. And that's an important skill. That's something that's learned and practiced and doesn't always come easily. But high performers often have that skill intact where they are able to influence other people. And that wraps up high performance habit number 5, or developing influence. Then lastly, the 6th high performance habit is demonstrating courage. One thing that's noted in the book is that high performers often do the tasks that scare them, that are uncomfortable, that they don't want to do, but they do them regardless. I love the quote that successful people are willing to do what unsuccessful people are not willing to do. And if you're doing the hard task, a lot of times you're doing the right thing. And if you're feeling too comfortable on a day-to-day basis, a lot of times you're not giving your most potential and you're not maximizing your day-to-day activities. And it might be a sign that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. However, if you can get comfortable with doing the uncomfortable things, that's going to help you build confidence to get you to the next level. And that is high performance habit number 6, demonstrating courage. And these are the 6 habits that are talked about throughout the book. I just skimmed the very surface of all of these high performance habits. If you go and get the book, Brendon does a really good job of going in depth and actually giving you practical things that you can implement in your day-to-day activities. So overall, I thought it was a very good book. I gave it a 9 out of 10, and I recommend getting the audio version if you can. And then the 6 habits that are talked about throughout the book, which are backed by research. In summary, the first high performance habit is seeking clarity. It is setting intention. It's also asking ourselves a question, what is the feeling that we're after? Not exactly the end result, but the feeling that we'll feel after we achieve that end result. I also talked about how the very first step in goal setting is knowing exactly where you stand and setting clarity around where you're at so that you can get to where you want to go. And then one practice that was mentioned was setting an alarm throughout the day or setting some kind of trigger to set intention throughout the day. And then the second habit was generating energy, owning the transitions throughout the day, also eating, sleeping, and getting exercise, and also focusing on setting intention, slowing down, and focusing on breathing. The third high performance habit was raising necessity, and I discussed how high performers have a higher sense of urgency and often take less time to take action. And high performers are also super conscious of the tasks that are a priority, as well as high performers often protect their day and protect their time. Number 4 was increasing productivity, increasing the outputs that matter, also saying no to 99% of things and saying yes to that 1%, as well as Brendon's quote, the main thing is to keep the main thing by not getting distracted. The 5th high performance habit was developing influence by challenging others to grow, becoming a good role model, and the diagram that Brendon talks about, or the influence model, which is teaching people how to think and also challenging people how to grow and contribute. And if we can do those things, we'll become a role model. And then lastly, he talks about demonstrating courage. That is the number 6 of the high performance habits. And it's doing the things that are uncomfortable, doing the things that you don't want to do, because successful people are willing to do the things that unsuccessful people are not willing to do. Overall, I thought it was a really good book. I'd really recommend it. And thank you guys for listening. We'll be back with another episode soon.